I could feel my spirit actually leaving my body. I saw and heard the conversations between my husband and the doctors taking place outside my room, about 40 feet away down a hallway. I was later able to verify this conversation to my shocked husband.
One NDer observed in the out-of-body state the reaction of the doctor to nearly losing this patient.
Why were you so upset, screaming and swearing in the operating room? Didn't you know that I could hear every word you said?
This NDer then shared what the doctor responded.
You are right. I was so frustrated and tired and angry in that operating room that I just started screaming when we were losing you. It was either scream or cry. You were dying, and there was not a damn thing that I could do to stop it. I will have to rethink what I say to an unconscious patient from now on, won't I?
Out-of-body experiences are often the first NDE element. The NERF survey asked 613 NDers, "Did you experience a separation of your consciousness from your body?" In response, 75.4% answered yes.
There isn't a way to explain it, as there is no feeling like it here on Earth. It was crystal clear. It was like going home at last. A feeling of belonging, of meaning, of completeness. It just seemed so much more real than anything I had ever experienced in my entire life.
The NERF survey asked, "How did your highest level of consciousness and alertness during the experience compare to your normal, everyday consciousness and alertness?" Of the NDers surveyed, 74.4% indicated they had more consciousness and alertness than normal.
This is the hardest thing to try and explain. Words will not come close to capturing the feelings, but I'll try. Total, unconditional, all-encompassing love, compassion, peace, warmth, safety, belonging, understanding, overwhelming sense of being home and joy. All I felt was love, joy, happiness, and every wonderful emotion you could feel all at once. Total peace, total calm. I was not in the least bit afraid or anxious. When we got to the light, the totality of life was love and happiness. There was nothing else. And it was intense. Very intense and endless in scope. I felt an extreme sense of love and peace and beauty that I cannot describe in words.
The NERF survey asked, "Did you have a feeling of peace or pleasantness?" To this question, 76.2% selected incredible peace or pleasantness. The NERF survey asked another question about a specific emotion during the NDE. "Did you have a feeling of joy?" NDers responded to this question with 52.5% selecting incredible joy. A small percentage of NDEs are frightening to the NDer.
My next awareness was of being submerged and cradled in a warm, wavy, wafting motion at the opening of a tunnel. The tunnel had billowy soft sides and was well lit, with the tunnel dimensions decreasing and brightness increasing as it got closer to a single bright light. We traveled very fast into a tunnel. The tunnel was all different colors: blue, yellow, white, green, and red.
The NERF survey asked, "Did you pass into or through a tunnel or enclosure?" Of NDers responding to this survey question, 33.8% answered yes.
A brilliant white light at the end of the tunnel, and when the wings enveloped me I became part of the white light. A beautiful light drew me to itself. The light still touches me with awe, and tears come immediately. At first the light was blue. Then it transitioned to white. It was an opalescent white. It almost glowed, but did not shine. It was bright, but not intense bright, like glowing bright, pure bright. Pure but not in the usual sense of the word. Pure as in something you've never seen before or could ever describe or put into words. It was as if we passed through a wall into my light pod directly. There was a large majestic center light, and then the individual yet connected pod lights exactly like the center light, only smaller. I think now the pod lights, like mine, were other souls connected to the center light, God.
The light may be described as brilliant, like a million suns, but virtually never hurts the NDer to look at it. NDers may dramatically describe their strong attraction to the light and their emphatic desire to approach or merge with the light. The NERF survey asked, "Did you see a light?" NDers responded with 64.6% answering yes.
I was surrounded by other beings or people who I felt as though I recognized. These beings were like family, old friends, who'd been with me for an eternity. I can best describe them as my spiritual or soul family. Meeting these beings was like reuniting with the most important people in one's life, after a long separation. There was an explosion of love and joy on seeing each other again between us all. My dad was right next to me, but I couldn't see him visually. My sister was very close, I felt she was to my left. I felt other family members close by, but I did not see them. My sister and other family members seemed to be more to the left. The only person besides my sister and my dad that I knew was my grandmother. There were others there, but none I can say for certain besides the ones I mentioned. I heard my mother's and daughter's voices, but my daughter, who was only approximately 2 at the time, well, it was the sound of her voice grown up, but I knew it was her voice. They called my name and my body moved like through an air current very quickly. It was like the wind carried me so fast, and I saw a bright light very quickly, and then a beach, and then I saw my mom and daughter standing on the beach. My daughter was grown up.
The NERF survey asked, did you meet or see any other beings? In response, 57.3% answered yes. When NDers encounter deceased beings, most are deceased relatives as opposed to friends or loved ones. Some NDers encounter seemingly familiar beings, but they cannot recall having previously met them. Later in their lives, some NDers recognize a picture of a deceased relative as the being they encountered in their NDE. The relative may have died years or even decades before the NDer was born.
Left my body, I had my diving watch on. I took some very unscientific measurements of the distance I traveled by watching for features and measuring them by the second hand on my watch. Totally unscientific. But my conclusion was, and has always been, I was measuring time in an altered time. The ground never moved in a linear fashion, the distances were erratic at best. The distances were always changing, sometimes repeating and then instantly becoming longer or shorter than the previous distance. Yet my watch was always ticking without change. My intuition and impression were that I was in a different time zone, one where my Earth-Ly watch was of no use or inept at making any measurement or reflecting time. Also, without mistake, I would say this whole thing took an hour or more. It seemed to me that I was in the NDE for a very long time. But when I asked my diving partners how long had I been unconscious, they estimated 5 to 10 minutes. Thus I had another reason to support why my diving watch didn't seem to measure the time in my NDE. It seemed as though I experienced so much in such a small length of earthly time. Where my soul had traveled to know nothing of time as we know of time passing on Earth. Both time and space in Earth stopped completely. Simultaneously, the time and the space on the other side was completely alive, evidential and real. Yes, while I was in the light, I had no sense of time as I know it here on Earth. In other words, no sense of the serial nature of time, past, present, or future. All times, past, present, and future, were experienced at every moment in time while I was in the light.
The NERF survey asked, did you have any sense of altered space or time? To this question, the majority, 60.5%, answered yes. Another NERF survey question focused only on an altered sense of time, asking, did time seem to speed up? NDers responded to this question with 33.9% selecting everything seemed to be happening all at once.
I saw my life flash before me shortly after I left my body and was still in the hospital room. I was told that I was going to help educate and teach many people, and that is exactly what I am doing now. I saw every important event that had ever happened in my life, from my first birthday to my first kiss to fights with my parents. I saw how selfish I was and how I would give anything to go back and change. Next, he showed me my life review. Every second from birth until death you will see and feel, and you will experience your emotions and others that you hurt, and feel their pain and emotions. What this is for is so you can see what kind of person you were and how you treated others from another vantage point, and you will be harder on yourself than anyone to judge you. I will not see what others have done to you. I will see what you have done to others.
Life reviews involve a review of prior events of the end year's life. Fragments of one's earthly life may be seen, or the review may be panoramic, covering all of one's earthly life. The NERF survey asked, did you experience a review of past events in your life? To that question, 22.2% of NDers answered yes.
Well, the end of that tunnel was the most peaceful place. It was beyond my imaginings, pure, serene, and loving. The landscape was beautiful, blue skies, rolling hills, flowers. All was full of light, as if lit from within itself and emitting light, not reflecting it. There was such beauty, beautiful beyond expression. There was also a bright city or something like a city in the distance. The colors and structures of everything were beautiful, awesome. All around me I could see and feel a beautiful peace and tranquility with love and peace. As far as the eye could see to my left was a beautiful landscape of tulips of every color imaginable. To my right was a wall of a beautiful blue that matched the sky. The sound of that music I cannot possibly describe with words because it simply cannot be heard with that clarity in this world. The colors were out of this world, so deep, so luminous, so beautiful.
The NERF survey asked, did you see or visit any beautiful or otherwise distinctive locations, levels, or dimensions? To this question 40.6% of NDers chose yes. Asking this question in a more general way, the NERF survey asked, did you seem to enter some other, unearthly world? To this question 52.2% of NDers responded that they encountered an unearthly realm.
When I looked into his eyes, all the secrets of the universe were revealed to me. I know how everything works because I looked into his eyes for a moment. All the secrets of the universe, all knowledge of all time, everything. I understood. I use this term because I did not actually hear. The colored drops were the experiences of all who had lived. The experiences existed as separate items yet belonged to the whole. The whole was the collective knowledge of all. The NERF survey asked, did you have a sense of knowing special knowledge, universal order and/or purpose? To this question 56% of NDers answered yes. Another question asked, did you suddenly seem to understand everything? To this question, 31.5% responded that they seemed to understand everything about the universe, and 31.3% responded that they seemed to understand everything about myself or others. On my side of the boundary, time seemed to go slow. On the other side, time went by faster. There was this door in front of me with this music coming out and people celebrating with utter joy that I knew and recognized as home. Once I crossed, I couldn't come back. I reached the point where I felt I had to make the choice whether to go back to life or onward into death. My best friend was there, who had died of cancer 2 years before, and she told me that this was as far as I could go or I would not be able to turn back. You have come to the edge. This is as far as you can go, she said. Now go back and live your life fully and fearlessly. I wasn't allowed to cross that boundary. There was no choice. The NERF survey asked, did you reach a boundary or limiting physical structure? To this question 31% of NDers answered yes. I remember as I looked down at them, I said to the angel, why don't they just let her die? I did not realize, at that time, the body that I was looking at was mine. Then in a commanding voice, she, the angel, said, you must go back now. She must live, she said in a soft calming voice. She has a son to raise. I was really hurt that I couldn't stay because there wasn't anything that I wanted more than to stay. Pure love is the best way to describe the being and place that I would be leaving. Under protest, I was sent back. I found out that my purpose now would be to live heaven on earth using this new understanding, and also to share this knowledge with other people. However, I had the choice of whether to come back into life or go toward death. I was made to understand that it was not my time, but I always had the choice, and if I chose death, I would not be experiencing a lot of the gifts that the rest of my life still held in store. One of the things I wanted to know was that if I chose life, would I have to come back to this sick body, because my body was very, very sick and the organs had stopped functioning. I was then made to understand that if I chose life, my body would heal very quickly. I would see a difference in not months or weeks, but days. The NDRF survey asked, were you involved in or aware of a decision regarding your return to the body? To this question, 58.5% answered yes.
As far as I'm concerned, it makes perfect sense that the best evidence for understanding what happens when we die would come from those who actually did nearly die or even experienced clinical death. This common-sense perspective is certainly validated in the NDRF study. The substantial majority of people who had a near-death experience believe their NDEs are real and are evidence of an afterlife. For NDers, having a near-death experience is their personal proof of both the reality of the NDE and an afterlife. In science, confirming the reality of a concept generally comes not from a single observation or study but from many independent studies with different methodologies. This cross-checking among scientific studies has always been the foundation for validating scientific discoveries. Thus it is vitally important to note that the NDRF study findings are corroborated by hundreds of prior NDE studies conducted by scores of NDE researchers. Throughout this book we cite many major NDE studies by other researchers. These other studies almost always make the same observations and come to the same conclusions as the NDRF study. This adds to the converging lines of evidence that lead me to conclude, there is life after death. I know this belief takes me out on a limb. Despite a recent poll by the Pew Forum on Religion and Public Life that shows 74% of Americans believe in life after death, I also know that this belief is often attributed to people with deep religious conviction. I want to make it clear that I am both a scientist and a believer in life after death. I have reconsidered much of what I was taught in medical school. This reconsideration began many years ago, when NDRF had just started. I was in the medical library searching fruitlessly for information about near-death experiences. It was unusually quiet that day, and as I sat amid tens of thousands of books and journals, I easily became lost in my thoughts. At my fingertips were the greatest medical and scientific studies and concepts in the world. Yet as I searched them, I found that the answer to the mystery of near-death experiences was not here. In the collective knowledge around me from the world's greatest doctors and medical scientists, I could find precious little to help me fully understand the near-death experience. I left the medical library with the question had come in with, what's the key to understanding near-death experiences? Later the answer came to me. It was so simple, yet it required a mindset different from the one cultivated in my academic training. The answer, listen, and listen carefully, to the people who have gone through a near-death experience. They surely are one of the best sources for understanding what awaits us at the brink of death and beyond. Since realizing that fact, I have never looked back. Near-death studies focus on stories and the people who tell them. It is through these people and their stories that answers to many important questions about mortality may be found.